Can women be ace aviators? Women in military aviation are rare, and women at the helm of a supersonic fighter are completely extraordinary. However, let's start from the beginning. In 1976, the U.S. Air Force Academy began accepting girls. Today, more than 700 women are registered as pilots. Prior to joining civil aviation, Tammy Jo Schultz, the commander of the Southwest Airlines liner, flew a fighter jet. Schultz spent 10 years in the U.S. Navy, where she was a fighter pilot. Indian Air Force Captain Bhawana Kanth successfully completed the preparatory program for combat missions in the MiG-21 fighter. She is the first female pilot in the country to receive a license for combat missions, however, only in the daytime. In China, female-only fighter-bomber squadrons are formed. In the United Arab Emirates Air Force, a pilot wearing a hijab woman has served on the F-16 fighter since 2007. In Russia, women are banned for 465 professions, but the profession of a pilot is not on this list. However, Svetlana Protasova is so far the only woman in the world who can fly the MiG-29. 31 girls are training in Russia today, but only 1 or 2 of them will become fighter pilots. Rahman De La Roche is considered the first lady in the world to receive a license to fly an aircraft. Today, they would call her Disaster Girl. She managed to charm one of the world's first aviators, Charles Voisin, and he taught her to fly. About 5 months after receiving permission, she demolished a tree. As you can see, Ramanda hasn't flown high. 2 years later, barely recovered from the plane crash, Ramanda got into trouble again. However, this time, it was a car accident. The woman survived, but her boyfriend, Charles Voisin, died. It is difficult to imagine how Voisin's death influenced the development of world aviation. In 1919, fate caught up on the French woman. The plane with Ramanda and another pilot crashed in the sky over Le Crétoy, France. The guy's name has not remained in history, but there was a monument erected to Ramanda in La Bourget. So it goes, as the great Kurt Vonnegut said in Slaughterhouse-Five or The Children's Crusade. Around the same time, the aviation boom has reached Russia. Emancipation was a trend. Therefore, in 1913, another Valkyrie named Lydia Zvereva appeared. Today, they would call her Daredevil. The girl flew boldly and decisively, attracting the attention of her male colleagues. At that time, not everyone dared to fly at a great height. However, Zvereva didn't fear a thing. She is also credited with the first single dive with the engine turned off. The Russian woman didn't die in the sky, but on land from an illness. Lydia married a pilot and lived her quiet life as a housewife, but could not survive typhus. In the United States, one of the most famous female aviators of that time was Amelia Earhart, who started flying in 1921. Today, they would call her the Stubborn Girl. She became world famous after her transatlantic flight that she made in 1928. The devices on the plane failed, but Amelia managed to land anyway. Amelia is also known for her friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt and the books that describe all of her adventures, all but one, the last one. During a round-the-world flight in 1937, her Lockheed Electra plane disappeared without a trace. President Roosevelt immediately gave the order to use all available ships from the nearest military bases for searches. Washington was spending $250,000 for the search every day, but there was no result. To understand the amount of funding in today's prices, multiply this amount by about 20. Some enthusiasts are still looking for Amelia. Unfortunately, taxpayer money is not spent on this anymore. However, some people have devoted their lives to the search. In 1997, aviator Linda Hinch repeated Amelia's last flight on a replica of her Lockheed Electra aircraft, with only one difference. The newest radio communication system was installed in the copy. Another bright page of women's aviation history is associated with the pilot Sabiha Goxson, a girl from a poor family in Bursa, Turkey. At the age of 12, she was adopted by Turkish President Mustafa Kemal. The world knows him as Ataturk. In 1935, Sabiha entered a flight school, and 2 years later, she became the country's first military pilot. After that, she worked as the head coach of the flight school. An airport in Istanbul is named after Goxson. She became the only female pilot on the 1996 USAF's 20 Most Famous Pilots in History poster. However, the first female military pilot boom came with the Second World War. Female pilots of the Third Reich, Liesl Bach, Bede Usa, Melita von Schaffenberg, either worked as instructors or ferried planes from Germany to the Eastern Front. Only Hannah Reich took part in the hostilities and even received the Iron Cross of the First Degree. The Red Army of the USSR has the largest number of female fighter pilots in 1939 through 1945. The best of them was Lydia Zvereva. She fought for only 10 months, but managed to make 186 sorties, conducted 69 air battles, scored 12 confirmed victories, and died in action. Lydia was only 22 years old. Almost all female pilots of the Third Reich happily lived to their old age, but the fate of many Soviet female fighter pilots was strange. Only a few of them died during an air battle. Senior Lieutenant Valeria Komyakova died in a plane crash while flying in a combat mission. Senior Lieutenant Evgenia Prokhorova died in a plane crash while escorting a transport plane. Senior Lieutenant Ryza Bilyeva died in a plane crash over the airfield. Senior Lieutenant Maria Batrakova was killed by lightning at the airfield. Senior Sergeant Olga Galisheva died during training flights. Petty Officer Lena Smirnova committed suicide with a TT pistol. However, these are just facts, and facts can't be arguments, because at the dawn of aviation, men also died under the most ridiculous circumstances. During World War II, there were also many non-combat losses among male pilots. But why is the profession of a fighter pilot a job mostly for men? Maybe it's all about G. This is not about the mysterious zone of the female body, but about the G forces that the human body experiences when flying a fighter. This overload is indicated in units of the standard acceleration due to gravity, G. To make it clear, on Earth, a person at rest experiences a 1G overload. Zero gravity is 0G. In an ascending elevator, or when taking off on a civilian liner, it's 1.5G. 6G is the Grandmaster overload for the modern fighter pilot. It is believed that when a person copes with such a load on a centrifuge, he has a chance to become a pilot of a supersonic fighter. Please note that it's only a chance, because the tests on land are only so close to the reality in the sky. For example, the Gripen fighter's overload reaches 9G during turns and sharp climbs. And these, as you know, are not the fastest fighters in the world. The pilot of the MiG-29 supersonic fighter aircraft faces overloads of up to 12G. With a positive overload, blood flows from the brain to the lower body. The body becomes heavy. The blood thickens like molten cast iron. From lack of blood circulation and oxygen, the brain malfunctions. The impulses reach the limbs more slowly. First, peripheral vision disappears. The eyes only see straight ahead, as in a tunnel, and then complete blindness sets in. The body begins to rebel, because it recognizes what is happening as the approach of death, and in the end, the person passes out. In other words, for the body of a fighter pilot, every combat or training flight is a little death, and only an effort of will makes the pilot remain conscious, suppress panic, and other destructive reactions of the body and psyche. Along with the colossal willpower that keeps consciousness, the pilot has to strain the muscles of the legs and core as when squatting with a barbell. Therefore, the pilots groan like bodybuilders in the training room. Muscle contraction literally pushes the thickened blood up to the head. After all, the brain is the pilot's main weapon. It is not easy to imitate a squatting with a barbell, listen to the orders of the dispatcher, and control the plane at the same time, make maneuvers, monitor instruments, and attack the enemy. Here, a special height compensation suit helps out a little. It compresses the body and prevents the rapid flow of blood, but the eyes, ears, and brain remain unprotected. Therefore, loss of consciousness in flight remains likely. But there is also negative overload. A negative load is much more dangerous than a positive one. With a sharp dive, the blood rushes to the head. No measures will help. There are no muscles in the skull, so it is defenseless. and only the short duration of maneuvers with a negative G index allows the pilot not to die from a cerebral hemorrhage right at the helm. By the way, when astronauts return to Earth, they do not have the ability to maneuver in the air. Therefore, during the ascent, the crew takes a horizontal position so that the chest becomes the upper point of the body. In the supine position, the entire load is transferred to the chest. Competent maneuvering and alteration of negative and positive loads, and most importantly, the ability to maintain composure during critical loads determine the skill of a fighter pilot. In a real air battle, the capabilities of the devices fade into the background. An experienced pilot flying a fourth-generation fighter can defeat a newcomer in a more modern and advanced aircraft thanks to the trained body. The training of an extra-class pilot takes from 5 to 10 years. In their first flights, the heart rate of a fighter pilot reaches 200 beats per minute. For example, champion sprinters have a heart rate of up to 180 beats per minute. However, the sprinter is in tension for several seconds, and the flight lasts dozens of minutes. Over time, the pilot learns to control his heart rate, and 130 to 140 beats per minute is considered normal. Also, over time, a tolerance to overloads appears, but not for everyone, only for chosen ones. Only practice shows whether the pilot will be able to perform complex maneuvers in the future. A few pilots become fighter pilots. The rest become instructors, teachers, air ferrymen, transport pilots, and so on. For about 10 years, an extra-class pilot is at his peak, with regular exercise and a healthy lifestyle, of course. But even the healthiest people often retire with a bunch of chronic overload-related illnesses. This is probably why there are few women among combat fighters. In general, the female body is less hardy. In addition, many women experience work interruptions in their lives. Thanks to this, you and I were born. Several months off flight will result in a loss of qualifications. Physiology is also changing. Often after the birth of a child, a woman can no longer return to her original physical form. Childbirth is a serious test for the body. So after watching this video, go thank your mother for not becoming a fighter pilot. And in general, call your parents more often.